Thank you, Rich. So, winding things down here in the draft, we've got round number 2 coming up. And as Rich said, we've got some Draft Master race action down in the feature match here. We've got all of the ones that are still in contention to find that Draft Master slot at the World Championship. We're going to start off with Brock Parker versus Christian Calcano. Let's head down for round 10. Hello and welcome to coverage of Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke, and we are ready for round number 10 in our feature match area here. Now, one of the slots in the World Championship, Ian, is Draft Master, the person who got the most match points here on the Pro Tour in Booster Draft. And we've actually got a bunch of people down in the feature match area here that are still in contention for this, though it's tightened up considerably. One of them is we've got Christian Calcano. He's facing against Brock Parker, who you take a look at Brock here. Brock's a Pro Tour champion. And Brock's sitting at 5-4 in the tournament right now. And he's up against Christian Calcano. Now, Christian has 52 match points in Booster Draft here.
And that's across the whole season, right?
That's
the whole
correct.
year.
Exactly, for the whole year. And he actually is in contention here, depending on how things plan out. So let's take a look at this match here as we've got Calcano playing blue-red against, wow, Brock Parker also on blue-red. That's interesting.
Yeah, it looks like these players have two pretty similar decks.
They must not have been sitting near each other. All right, we're just going to work on getting this signal back for you here. Looks like Calcano is still developing his board. I'm having to use a camera that's a little far away to see too much detail here, but we'll do our best to keep you updated. Looks like Parker made a play and then shipped the turn back to Calcano, who's now trying to decide how he wants to develop his board out. It's interesting to have two players on the same color pair in the same pod.
Yeah, it can definitely happen, especially if they're separated by a few seats in draft. And blue-red being one of the more popular color combinations at this Pro Tour.
So you can see Conduit of Storms there has joined the team for Christian Calcano, and on the other side, Thermo Alchemist, one of the key cards for the spells version of the blue-red deck here. Looks like a Cultist Staff is going to get equipped up to the Conduit of Storms there for Calcano, and he's going to start applying pressure, and this is exactly what he needs to do to combat the type of thing that Brock can do on his side with the Thermo Alchemist. Now, there's a downside, though, to this plan from Calcano. And the downside comes in the fact that the blue-red deck has a lot of ways to get rid of a creature that's been equipped or drag under, unsubstantiate, just the wind. A lot of playable good reasons to have those in your deck, and then boom, it sets Calcano back a ton of mana and maybe makes it impossible for him to come back. So it's a high risk but high reward line here because he does get to just pound Brock Parker's life total down in big chunks of 4 and maybe even 7 down the line here if he hits his 5th mana.
Yeah, indeed. And I think Calcano is going to be in a little bit of a hurry right now because we got a sneak peek at his hand just a couple moments ago, and it looks like he's pretty mana flooded right now. He's got a Wretched Griff in his hand, and the rest are just basic lands. So he's kind of got a lot riding on this Conduit of Storms here. Brock Parker with a much more well-balanced hand. So I think if Brock can weather the storm here for a couple turns, he's going to be in pretty decent shape.
You weren't kidding about that. 4 lands and a Wretched Griff, though. It looks like he's found an Ingenious Scob off the top for Calcano here.
Nice pickup for him.
Yeah. The interesting part about it is that what he wants to do with this turn? Because now that he's got 5 mana, he can transform Conduit of Storms if he'd like.
Yeah, that's certainly the more powerful play that he has access to. But as you mentioned earlier, it's a lot softer to something like a Just the Wind or a Drag Under.
Yeah. He's already kind of put a lot of eggs in this basket. That would be eggs basket 1. At
Yes.
that point.
But sometimes you got to do that.
It's true. But I think he was somewhat bailed out there by that Ingenious Scob draw because that gave him another good option to use his mana on that wasn't just moving in on this Conduit of Storms.
Definitely true. Also, if the game goes a little bit longer, he can just hard cast that Wretched Griff for 7 mana and just get a lot of value. 3/4 flyer and a card without having to sacrifice a creature is just a great deal.
Totally. I found myself in that position in this format a few times where I have 6 lands, and I'm like, oh, I can emerge this Wretched Griff. I'm like, I can wait till next turn.
Yeah.
Just cast the thing.
In some ways, it kind of serves as a late game mana sink, where now your emerged creatures get additional value in that you don't have to sacrifice a creature to cast them.
A lot of late game mana sinks in this format, and that I have found as I've gotten more nuanced at deciphering formats is a decider for me on a format that I will like. I
Definitely.
love late game mana sinks. Addicted to them, Ian. Keep them coming, buddy.
So it looks like Alchemist's Greeting comes out here for Brock Parker, taking out the Ingenious Scab, clearing up the board a little bit more.
Well, not too bad, though, from Christian Calcano's perspective. Brock's going to get in with the Devil token and knock Calcano down to 15 before passing the turn back. Let's see if Calcano can find another action spell to play here, or if he's going to be forced to just maybe dump his mana into his Conduit of Storms. He doesn't have anything else to do anyway.
I mean,
No,
he
he's
can
not doing
actually get that 7th mana post-combat, right, from the Conduit of Storms?
Mm-hmm.
And cast Wretched Griff.
There we go. Business. Unfortunately, he found yet another land. He drew a mountain for the turn and then just drew an island off of the Wretched Griff.
Wow, Calcano really flooding out here, although he does have a commanding board position right now, so we'll see what Brock Parker can do about it.
Brock's got a Bedlam Reveler in his hand. Can't quite see Brock's graveyard from this angle. See a couple of cards sitting just off camera for Brock there. Maybe we could just bring those. Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Tim.
Also a copy of Gold Knight Castigator in Brock's hand. Not a card that's at its best when you're so far behind on board. Would be a pretty dangerous play.
Yeah, it's really interesting when that happens, you know, because it's still a sweet blocker.
Yeah,
You know,
that's true.
It really is.
But
Like
you do risk, you know, something like a Fiery Temper
Yeah.
dealing a boatload of damage.
when your opponent's playing red, it doesn't look
There are
so
almost
great.
so many risks that it's hard to, you know, enumerate them.
I have to agree. So he's got Laboratory Brute as well as the Bedlam Reveler and the Gold Knight Castigator. And well, Brock's going to have to figure out what he wants to do this turn. He is certainly up against it. Brock is an excellent limited player. You'll see him out at the GP circuit a lot as well. It looks like he went for the Bedlam Reveler and just said, you know, this Castigator is going to be too much of a liability, and the Laboratory Brute's not super effective, so I'm just going to play this Reveler and draw 3 cards and hope to find something great.
Back over to Calcano's turn. He does have lethal attack in 3 turns with that Wretched Griff, if nothing else changes here on the board. Looks like he picked up a copy of Savage Alliance that reduces the clock to... Excuse me.
It could. I mean, the hidden mode there with giving your creatures trample plus damaging a bunch of them.
Yes.
What you can do is actually for a lot of damage.
Yeah, it could actually allow him to get that Conduit of Storms through, or Conduit of Emrakul if he decides to transform it.
Spontaneous Mutation is the only card that Calcano is going to be thinking about realistically from Brock's perspective, from Brock's side of the board, but there's not really much he can do about it anyway. So, while considering it, I don't think it's really going to change his course of action here. Brock is going to go ahead and chump block here, and this might block. Calcano, he might go for it here. He's going to be thinking about the possibility of Spontaneous Mutation, but I think he's probably just going to do it anyway.
Yeah, I like this play just to, again, increases the clock.
Lethal. 3, 6. Sorry, he only goes to 2 in that sequence.
These 2 die.
Yeah. Deal 1 to you.
12.
So not quite death there for Brock Parker, but very, very close for Calcano. We'll see. Now, remember, Brock did draw 3 fresh cards last turn and had to use most of his mana on his turn. So he could have some sweet stuff. Let's take a look. He's got Niblis of Dusk and a Borrowed Hostility. Not what he wanted to see there. Calcano has got Brock down to 1. Does Brock have any way to survive? He can play the Niblis, which can block the Wretched Griff. He can block the Conduit of Storms / Emrakul with his Bedlam Reveler. So it does look like he's able to survive a turn here.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's just in chump block mode at this point.
You can see by the expression on his face, he's not too happy about it. That is not where he wants to find himself.
Subtle thing here, but I do like how Christian Calcano switched the Cultist Staff over to the Wretched Griff post-combat there, just to ensure something like an Alchemist's Greeting on Brock Parker's turn wouldn't be able to take out the Griff.
Which is the more important attacker as it's a flyer.
Correct, yes.
In the meantime, Brock's actually just going to get in there because he has a Stromkirk Occultist to go with his Niblis of Dusk, which gives him the requisite 2 chump blockers to stay alive here. I wonder what outs he has in his deck to maybe kill Christian with the Bedlam Reveler, because he could have left that back for a double block on the Conduit of Storms and actually killed it even if it gets transformed, where the 3-powered Stromkirk Occultist can't actually trade for it, and if it does get transformed.
Yeah, I mean, Brock does have a Borrowed Hostility in his hand for a little bit of extra damage, so I think he's just wagering that his better plan here is to try to actually arrange a race situation.
I agree. He's 1 combat trick or burn spell away then, right?
Yeah. This is actually a much closer game than it would have appeared.
Borrowed Hostility is 7 damage with the Bedlam Reveler. Now, this is going to be really tough, though, because Christian did have a creature, and Brock was kind of banking on that to happen. But, Brock assuming this is what's going to give me the best chance of actually winning. And that will do it there. Unfortunately for Brock, he was not able to piece together a burn spell, or, what he really needed there was something like Drag Under into another spell. Like, that would have done it. He was in a really, really tight position. That was not going to work out that often, but he correctly, I believe, assumed that would give him the best chance to win. But Calculator takes the first game. We'll be back right after these messages.
Ready to take your game to the next level and start on the path to the Pro Tour? Rise to the challenge and test your skills at a local preliminary Pro Tour qualifier. To find an event near you, visit magic.wizards.com/pptq.
And welcome back to the feature match area here at Pro Tour Eldritch Moon. Looks like we're going to see what Timothy Wu and David Mines are up to. David is a native Australian. They're both at 5 and 4. Tim is from the United States. And as we join the match, David Mines finds himself up a game. Also on our left table, you see John Finkel and Scott Alter fighting it out. They're going to game 3 right now. So let's take a look and see what Timothy and David are up to.
So Timothy Wu here on white-red. Looks like a fairly aggressive deck. Against David Mines playing blue-red. Again, a popular combination here this weekend.
And we've got kind of a funny mirror match here going on, Ian. Do you see handwear Garrison for both players somehow?
Wow.
Of course, the player who gets their handwear Garrison down first at a pretty nice advantage there. And it looks like it was Tim Wu in this scenario. And an exultant occultist for David before he passes the turn back, desperately trying to stabilize against a really fast start for Tim Wu. Look at this. Double Sanguinary Mage. He's got that Garrison. He's even got one of the tokens that survived combat last time.
Yeah.
And a Stern Constable, too, which is a card we didn't see much of in Shadows. And given that there's only one Shadows pack left, we probably won't be seeing a ton of it here either. But if you do pair it up with red, it is actually an excellent Madness Enabler in an aggressive deck. It has a very thin role, but it does fill that role quite nicely.
I'm impressed with Timothy Wu's white-red deck here. He's really just blasting out of the gates. Imagine he had a card like Borrowed Grace.
Oh,
on
yeah,
his
for
board
sure.
state.
Okay, you know what? Let's go back to Brock Parker versus Christian Calcano, because this one might take a little while to pan out, and I don't want to miss anything on our front table. So let's jump back, and we'll see if Calcano can finish the job here. Remember, he's fighting for that draft master slot, but he's behind. Marcio Carvalho, who's also in
5-4
the feature match area here, is up a match over Christian.
narratives.
Brock's enjoying his time in the feature match area.
Okay. So you pass the turn. I'm gonna.
Yeah, I drew for my turn and pass.
Just making sure. Go.
Go.
No turn 2 play here for Calcano, but there wasn't one from Brock either. He does have a turn 3 play with Exultant Cultist, so. Hey, look. The mirror match is fully mirrored here. Exalted Cultist on both sides of the battlefield.
Yeah, a card that's great to combine with emerge creatures, but also just great in any deck.
Interesting. So Brock Parker is going to attack. And interestingly, Calcano's going to block. They both just want the card. Just give me that card. And there's Estencia Innkeeper for Brock Parker. Card hasn't been amazing, but it's done its job. It really can provide a really annoying speed bump as far as curving out goes for your opponent.
Yeah, I have it in the generally solid camp, but it's also sort of a high variance card in that sometimes you just really get your opponent by throwing off their curve. And I like that potential quite a bit.
Yeah, and your worst case isn't that bad. 3/3 for 3. You wouldn't run it on its own, but it's not that bad. Okay, there's Conduit of Storms now for Calcano, as he was only able to use 3 of his 4 mana on that turn.
So Brock with an interesting decision this turn. He does have a copy of Gold Knight Castigator in his hand, which can really apply a lot of pressure to Brock, but I mean to Christian Calcano, but it does come with a lot of risk.
Yeah, especially against the red deck.
Yeah.
But if he plays it, he's attacking for 7 right now.
Yeah, and that is really, really tempting. Brock also with Galvanic
played it.
Bombardment picked up for the turn here, so he does go in on the Gold Knight Castigator. A big play here from Brock Parker, potentially attacking for 7 damage. Looks like he comes in only with the Gold Knight Castigator. Okay, so he's kind of hedging his bets a little bit here, getting in for 4 and leaving back the Stencia Innkeeper as a potential blocker. Christian Calcano with a lot of options in his hand for what to play here, but not a lot of time. He's really got to be thinking about how best to plan out this race-like situation over the next couple turns.
Combat. Sure. Trigger.
And Brock's going to snap block here.
Transform.
And that's going to force the transform. Now, there's some interesting interactions here. Brock can have a Galvanic Bombardment. He can have a Borrowed Hostility.
Yeah, this is a pretty dangerous play from Christian Calcano. You can see he has so many cards in hand. He's a little, not mana screwed, but choked on mana relative to the amount of power that he has in his hand. But he decides to spend his mana all transforming that werewolf, and I would say he gets a little bit punished there, Marshall.
He did. I mean, it was a 2-for-1 on his side. He got 2 cards out of Brock, but he has no board state and is completely tapped out. And now all of a sudden, Brock is just going to hammer him with his Gold Knight Castigator. And it's going to be tough for Christian to get back on his feet in time.
Yeah, and indeed, there's a Cultist Staff equipped to the Gold Knight Castigator coming in for 6 damage now. And that presents a very, very fast clock on Christian Calcano.
Well, sometimes it's okay to give up a 2-for-1 if it gives you such a strong board presence that you're going to be able to lock out a bunch of cards from your opponent. Uh-oh. This is one of the ways that Christian gets back in this game, by the way. He plays a Stitched Mangler to keep that Gold Knight Castigator locked down. He also follows up with a Cultist Staff. But that Castigator, it needs to attack every turn. And here's Brock playing a Thermo Alchemist, which is fine, but his hand is reduced to Mountain Galvanic Bombardment here.
So the Alchemist is actually okay. So he played the Borrowed Hostility rather than the Galvanic Bombardment.
Yes.
Okay, that's huge because if he still had the Borrowed Hostility in his hand, that's an additional 3 damage on top of the 6 from the Gold Knight Castigator, along with 1 more from the Thermo Alchemist, would be the 10 that he needs to end the game next turn.
Yeah.
However, he made the other decision and played the Borrowed Hostility instead of the Galvanic Bombardment. So that could wind up costing him, potentially.
Yeah, the Galvanic Bombardment not able to go to players that only hits creatures. And we'll see how this plays out from here.
If Christian Calcano can survive, he has a lot of cards in his hand.
It's interesting to see how much that decision on which one of those cards to use is going to play out, because normally that would be the right play. Keeping a Galvanic Bombardment in your hand to make sure that you don't get killed by creatures from a Gold Knight while you have a Gold Knight Castigator out is much more powerful than having a combat trick.
Also,
but if
worth
it's a whole
noting,
turn.
Yeah, Brock just drew the Thermo Alchemist last turn, so that actually made the 1 point of difference because otherwise the Borrowed Hostility would only be 9 points there. So it makes sense why Brock made that decision in the moment, but it may turn out.
Might get him.
It might get him, although I would say Brock's still a favorite, the way this game is looking right now. But all it could take is 1 top deck from Christian Calcano.
Silberland Snapper?
Okay.
That's not how Calcano drew this one up, I'll tell you that. But there it is. card you don't see. It doesn't actually see a lot of play. Period.
Yep.
And I think Brock is probably going to assume that snapper is able to attack next turn just because it represents a huge amount of damage.
Shoot you.
So this is a main phase. Ping you with the Thermo Alchemist, play Make Mischief.
Untap.
Ping you again, Galvanic Bombardment, the Devil. Shoot you with the Devil, attack with the Castigator. So,
that was
okay.
cool.
After all, Brock did assemble lethal on that same turn. So things worked out pretty well for him.
He used the Make Mischief to do one to Calcano because it can target creatures or players. And then he killed the Devil with that bombardment we were talking about, and then used the Devil to do 1 damage.
As well as each time he plays a spell, he untaps his Thermo Alchemist, which does an additional damage. So really just chipping away. And that was pretty cool how he assembled that extra damage he needed that turn.
That was pretty tricky stuff. All right, Evan Esposito is playing against Marcio Carvalho. Again, Marcio with the lead. Not only in this match, he's up a game, but also in the Draft Master standings. So, you know, he's looking on 55 match points right now for the season at Booster Draft, and that puts him a full 3 clear of Christian Calcano at the moment,
Okay.
who we're watching. So, you know, if Marcio goes win-win, he's got it. He can just seal it up by just winning both of this round and then the next round. And he's 1 game away from sealing up this one as well. Now, as far as board states go, well, this one reminds me a little bit more of Standard from yesterday. There's a lot of permanence, a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, indeed.
Green-white for Marcio, white-red, normally an aggressive color pair from Evan Esposito. Also, working through the creatures, it looks like some pretty cool stuff here. I do see one interesting card, a Cryptolith Fragment, down on the bottom for Evan Esposito. And it looks like
that's very
that
interesting.
could become relevant pretty quickly here, as once both players are down to 10 or less life, you activate it, both players lose a life, and then it transforms, and things get a little scary for your opponent from there.
But here we go. Looks like Evan Esposito sending some creatures into the red zone.
Looks like a bunch of small creatures on Marcio Carvalho's side of the battlefield. Just every creature's relatively small here. And it looks like Evan really has been able to kind of go over the top of him this game. Looks like he's interested in trading off a bunch of his creatures here as well. You can see a Sigarda down on the bottom part of the screen there for Evan. And, you know,
Close your box. Order the
We'll
Eldrazi Horror first, and order the Thraven Inspector first. Pass your priority.
Has priority. Is there anything for Marcio? Remember, when you're the one that's sitting there
Right. I gain 3.
with Sigarda out, you don't mind a bunch of stuff going to your graveyard.
Do 15.
Esposito 15. Allow 8.
Flames. Pass.
Evan also gained 3 life in that transaction thanks to a Paladin.
Things looking pretty good for Evan Esposito here.
I have to say that, you know, when we snapshotted this game, it looked pretty muddled, and that just unmuddled things quite cleanly. Evan Esposito is going to make a bunch of humans here. 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. He's just going to exile his whole graveyard and just make 4/1/1 humans, and he's going to be able to just take over with that.
Yeah, as well as that Cryptolith Fragment keeps chipping away.
Yes. And even though it doesn't look like it's going to transform anytime soon because he's gained a fair bit of life, it still just makes both players lose a life. And it's going to be really difficult for Carvalho to not die to that, not die to the board, and to get Evan dead, you know, within that time frame. This one looks really good for Esposito at this moment.
Combo.
Team. Yeah, he knows that he can just slam the door here. And Marcio Carvalho has seen enough of this nonsense. Looks like Sigarda really taking over that game in the late stages as both players had kind of emptied their hand on the battlefield.
Absolutely. So that ties up the match, one apiece.
Okay, looks like our main table, perfect timing, is all ready to go. Christian Calcano versus Brock Parker. A really cool finish from Brock there as he found the victory. He was relatively close in game one in a game that looked like he was way, way out of as well. And I'm curious to see if he can put it together or if Calcano actually ends up beating him here.
I'll put it on the bottom. Put it on the top? Top, yeah.
You guys can start.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we are underway in game three in the blue-red mirror match between Christian Calcano and Brock Parker. And that's really what you want to see on turn two if you are playing the blue-red deck. You want to see a Thermo Alchemist. Christian Calcano with his now signature Conduit of Storms. He's had it all 3 games.
Looks like Incendiary Flow there takes out the Conduit of Storms. Gets an extra ping in from the Thermo Alchemist.
Not bad. Incendiary Flow's good.
Yeah.
That is a good one. Christian Calcano falls down to 18 life. Timothy Wu and David Mines even on games on one of our side tables. So a lot of game threes happening. In fact, we've had game threes across the table here in the feature match. This is the main match, game 3 right now. Drowned Explorers for Brock Parker. Not super exciting, but he'll take it.
Now, Christian Calcano missed his land drop last turn, but does pick up a 4th land this turn.
All right. He's got a Stitchwing Scob. Card we actually saw in Standard yesterday. I never thought I'd see that. It was Marcio who was playing it, too, if I remember correctly.
Oh, that's right. Yep. That blue-black zombies deck with prized amalgam.
That's the one.
Brock here thinking through his options. Take a look at Brock's hand. Looks like that Gold Knight Castigator is back again in his hand there.
And he's also got Galvanic Bombardment just to take care of the Stitchwing Scob right off the bat.
And here comes that Castigator.
Wow, what a turn.
Cracking in for 4 damage.
You got to love his position here.
Yeah, he's looking great. That Thermo Alchemist dealing so much damage over time as well.
Wow, Scott Alter just beat John Finkel 2 games to 1.
So really interesting here, Marshall.
Okay.
Christian Calcano adds
Ooh.
Mercurial Geist to the
Ooh.
battlefield, which when there's a Gold Knight Castigator on the other side of the battlefield, that is a really, really scary card.
Like, can Brock keep attacking?
I don't know. I mean,
It is so scary to see that Mercurial Geist. It already
and
gets huge.
looking in Calcano's hand, he does have 2 spells. He's got a Distemper of the Blood as well as a Savage Alliance. And remember, Distemper of the Blood actually grants Trample
It does.
as well.
Yeah, it is a sorcery, so it will trigger the Mercurial Geist. It's a little clunky of a card, not an all-star, but hey, it gets the job done here.
Oh, but wow. Brock Parker, I see, has just picked up Adjust the Wind.
Oh, that is massive.
So-
and you can see he's tempting Calcano to
Yes.
go for it. Is Calcano going to just do it? He's got 3 spells in his hand.
I think he has to go for it here. I mean, Calcano's back is up against the wall here. He's facing down the Thermo Alchemist. He's taking 4 damage in the air every turn.
Well, I'm going to tell you, though, he did just draw a Wretched Griff for the turn as well. Now, that doesn't block the Castigator particularly well. It is an alternate option to play that, sacrifice maybe the Cultist and draw a card and kind of map things out. But, man, he has the win on the table otherwise. He has to, right? He's got Borrowed Hostility, Savage Alliance, and Distemper of the Blood in his hand. Yeah. You hear Calcano laugh because he's like, do I do it? You know, there's 3 different cards that he has to worry about here. There's a lot. There's Unsubstantiate. There's Just the Wind. There's Compelling Deterrence. Look at him.
And so
He has to
specifically
decide.
what we're talking about here is Barred Hostility plus Distemper of the Blood. That's 5 power right there. Plus 2 triggers of the Geist. That's 6 more power. Plus the 1 base power. That's a 12 power Mercurial Geist. And the damage it dealt would be doubled because of the Gold Knight Cascader. So that's an attack for 24 damage if Christian Calcano believes that Brock Parker doesn't have an answer. Now, we know
Look at
Brock
Brock.
Parker does have Adjust the Wind in his hand, so he could actually bounce that Geist at instant speed.
All right, he's going for at least the first stage. Now, the question is he going to move all the way in, or is he going to kind of hedge his bets a little here? Let's find out. Trigger, trigger.
So
7.
okay, that resolves. So he's a 7 currently.
Currently, says Calcano. Now, he could go for Savage Alliance here.
These two to bring this back. Trigger Madness, Distemper, trigger.
He's doing it. He's going for it. Oh, and once he pings it, you hear Calcano say, "Oh, you've actually got it." And just the wind returns it to his hand. And that was the game. That was it. Brock Parker
Wow.
wins. Calcano just thought about it. He knew that he was taking on risk. He knew that this was a possibility, and he couldn't. He had to go for it.
I love the play, though. I'm 100% behind that play. I think in the position that Calcano was in, he had to go for it there.
I only have 4 lands. It's like I literally have to have like 2 pump spells.
Wow, you could hear the last words there from Calcano as he was describing what his hand looked like and what the situation looked like from his perspective. Let's take a look at Timothy Wu versus David Mines. They are in Game 3. Again, David is from Australia, and he's actually, interestingly, he's in the race for Australian captaincy at the World Magic Cup.
Okay.
Yeah, him and Paul Jackson were pretty close in points. They were just, I think, 3 points dividing them coming in. So... Well, I don't know how Paul Jackson's doing offhand, but David Mines sitting at 5-4, putting up a solid effort here in day 2, and trying to make a run.
Dead. Super dead. And you're good. Anytime, I'll ping you again.
All right, it looks okay. I can see on one of my side screens here. It looks like David has a Thermo Alchemist going, and he's going to start pinging away. But there's a Faithbearer Paladin on the other side of the battlefield, which is, I got to say that card's pretty solid, and it undoes a lot of Thermo Alchemist triggers once it gets into
That's
combat.
true. It's not the most efficient card, but it's very impactful, though.
It's got to be one of those hard cards to design, right? Like 4 mana, it's too good. 5 mana, it's like, sure.
Yep.
4.5 mana is not really we can't do that, right?
Yeah, it's hard to do high power life linkers at low mana. I mean, sorry, at low rarity is what I meant to say there.
David with no other board state other than the Thermo Alchemist.
Solid dude.
I think David was describing the Faithbearer Paladin as a solid dude. Looks like a Vexing Scuttler here for David is what he's got pulled to the front of his hand. He's got a nice little graveyard going over there, so he's going to be able to get something back.
Yep.
So a nice big 4/5 to get in the way of the 3/4 Paladin. He does lose his Thermo Alchemist from Emerge, though, which matters. But I think David figured, look, if you could start hitting me with this 3/4 lifelinker, the Thermo Alchemist isn't going to do much anyway, so I may as well get a card back and put a big blocker in the way.
Looks like he brought back Reduced to Ashes with the Vexing Scuttler.
And you can also see why he'd like that against the Paladin. Timothy Wu, you can see he's wearing his East-West Bowl hoodie. That's a testing team that he plays for. And there's David. He's from about three hours outside of Sydney. He had to drive down, or I think he flew down actually. Why not? So we see Choking Tethers is going to take care of the Vexing Scuttler and free up that Paladin to go ahead and get in an attack. And a nice turn from Timothy Wu here as well. He's got a Steadfast Cathar as follow-up. So that's a great place to put 5 mana there. Kill your big threat, put out another threat, and even unlock an attack. Really nice. Timothy's starting to plan for the fact that his Paladin is not going to be around for very long, potentially, as David has the answer for it in hand. Timothy knows it, and away it goes.
There's that Reduce to Ashes, cast again.
Leaves Timothy Wu with just the Steadfast Cathar. David's at 15. So he'll take a couple of points of damage here, but next turn, you know, depending on what he's got going on in his hand, he's going to be able to rebuild. Let's take a look at what David's got. Oh, he's got a Bedlam Reveler as well. Wow, he's got a nice little hand here. A little expensive, but Laboratory Brute, Sleep Paralysis, Bedlam Reveler, Geist Blast. I'll take that in the late game.
Very solid. His deck's looking pretty nice.
Yeah, the only downside to this hand is that he has all sweet spells and doesn't want to discard them to the Reveler. He's going to want to empty out his hand first. A little expensive to do so, but you can see how David has kind of mapped out this turn. Wow, is that a Drownyard Behemoth off the top for him as well? Let me grab his deck list here because it looks like David came up with a pretty sweet one here. Yeah, it was. He's got a Vexing Scuttler and a Drownyard Behemoth. But he wants to make sure his life total stays as high as possible, so he's just going to use Geist Blast to take down the Steadfast Cathar while the shields are down, as it were. He gets +2/+0 when it, or +0/+2 when it attacks, but when it's just sitting there, you can zap it. Sorry, that was actually the Stern Constable that he took out, not the Steadfast Cathar. Oh, what a beating.
Wow, here comes the Drownyard Behemoth, sacrificing the Vexing Scuttler for huge value there.
Oh, man. So the 5/7 with Flash is going to come down. It's also got Hexproof right now, and he gets to just confidently block the Courageous Outrider. And you can see now why David wanted to use his burn spell on the tapper there. Wanted to make sure that everything goes cleanly with this sequence. Although I suppose the hexproof from the Drownyard Behemoth prevents any tapping shenanigans anyway.
Right.
This is interesting, though. Here's a Borrowed Grace now from Timothy Wu, which is going to let his Courageous Outrider survive combat, though it will not kill the Drownyard Behemoth. So he just kind of had to throw away a card in his hand to keep his board presence intact. You hear what Timothy said? He said that was a good draw.
Yeah, sure was.
I'm sure David agrees. You know, even though David's a little bit behind on life totals, I feel like he's in a really good position to win this game. Given
Yeah, I
his
definitely
hand.
agree, Marshall. He's got a well-stocked hand. Can deploy that and then follow up with the Bedlam Reveler to refill.
He's going to play Laboratory Brute to further bolster his position on the ground. He's got 2 very solid blockers now. David keeping that Sleep Paralysis in his hand, that's smart. You know, one of the things that you'll see people do is use their removal a little too eagerly. And if you look at the board state as it sits now, David is not going to be getting attacked next turn unless Timothy finds some type of removal spell.
Mm-hmm.
And if he does, then you can use the Sleep Paralysis. Or if your life total is really low, sometimes you'll use it to make sure that you don't die to any removal spell or something like that. But here, you know, keeping that in hand and letting his creatures be his removal spells means that, like, if Timothy says, oh, here's a big angel or something like that that's going to kill him in the air, then David has an answer for it still. Looks like he's going to play a Scourge, and hey, there is a little flyer there. Dawn Griff.
Yeah, it's at least worth thinking about taking out that Dawn Griff.
I'm looking at it now, and I'm kind of thinking that that's what he should do.
Yeah, I mean, he's so far ahead in card advantage this game that I feel like as long as he doesn't lose in the short term, he is going to win a longer game.
That's kind of what I was thinking too, yeah. He's going to play the Cultist, and he's also going to play the Handwear Garrison. Now, this was the more mana-efficient line for
Absolutely.
David. It does mean that he's going to take likely a couple of damage from the Dongriff here, though.
7.
But he figures it's unlikely that Timothy's going to be able to get him from 9 to dead just off of that 2/2 flyer and bolstering out his board in a pretty impressive way, especially with the Handwear Garrison, was worth it for David, so he went for that line instead. Now we see the sleep paralysis on the Dongriff.
Yeah, I like this sequencing quite a bit from Mines.
No attacks. He is still at 7, facing a player at 19. Timothy has the luxury of just taking damage, while David really doesn't. Okay, an Extricator of Sin has entered the battlefield for Timothy Wu, which is going to let him sacrifice another permanent and get a 3/2 Eldrazi token. Now, can we see if he actually has Delirium yet? He's got instant, land, creature, and enchantment. He does have Delirium.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that
you
means
can
the
see that.
Extricator is going to transform
That's
next
right.
turn.
It's going to become Extricator of Flesh. You can take a look at it on the right-hand side of your screen. It's kind of a weird creature. It gives your Eldrazi vigilance, including it,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's got this activated ability that you can start trading in non-Eldrazi and kind of turning your whole army into this horde of 3/2 vigilance Eldrazi creatures.
Pretty good.
I like Timothy Wu. He's pretty good. That was, of course, the big capper to this sequence that you and I have been outlining for about 3 or 4 turns now for David. He's played the Bedlam Reveler and reloaded his hand.
6. Untap. Trigger.
So, Extricator of Flesh. Now online for Timothy Wu. Okay, well, spoiler alert, Marcio won his match. I don't know if you saw him fist pumping in the background, but that was a big one for Marcio. That puts him at 58 draft match points on the season, and very likely could put him just right into that draft master seat at the World
Absolutely,
Championship.
especially since Christian Calcano lost his round this game.
That's right.
His match this round.
That's right. So we'll be keeping the finer details on that updated for you as we go. But things looking good for Marcio Carvalho. I think it's safe to say that. And he's excited about it.
So this game really starting to slow down a little bit here. Mines, I think, has the upper hand in terms of just the board that he's presenting here. But of course, he is behind on life total. Has to be a little bit careful. Now
Does
with
look like Mines is starting to attack with the Drowner Behemoth.
yeah, I think a big part of that is that he picked up a copy of Jace's Scrutiny. So now he can make a much, much safer attack, both in terms of getting good trades if there's a block, but also protecting himself a little bit in case there's an attack back that he didn't expect.
And Timothy Wu doesn't really have a lot at stake here as far as trying to pile up a whole bunch of blockers. So what he's going to do is he's going to take a relatively useless creature, Steadfast Cathar, block, and then before damage happens, he's going to sacrifice it to the Extricator of Flesh and turn it into a fresh Eldrazi. And that's a sequence I think that we'll see pretty consistently, but this is a big play now for Mines. He's played an Aberrant Researcher. An Aberrant Researcher is a card that he can use to pile on damage in a real hurry, especially if it were to transform.
That's right. Now, finally, he has a flying attacker.
How long do we have?
2 minutes.
You heard it from them. How long do we have? Well, we've got 2 minutes. And this A lot could ride on this thing transforming right here. And he did transform it.
Wow.
That's big. He's going to be playing very quickly. He just found Adjust the Wind off the top as well, just in case there's any blockers from Timothy Wu of the flying variety. And in it comes, David Mines is going to start crunching in for 5 points of damage a turn, and it is in his interest to play very quickly. He is definitely in the lead now.
You need to see the graveyard. The grave, please.
How many cards? Two.
Can David find enough damage before turns gets called and before those turns end? It looks like he can quite easily.
So here's the thing. It looks like Timothy Wu actually had picked up a copy of Reduced to Ashes the previous turn, but decided just to sit on it a little bit.
Well, now this gets really interesting because if that's the case, then David, let's see what he's got in his hand. It looks like he's got actually Deny Existence in Jace's Scrutiny, so he will not be able to interact with that in any
Deny
way.
Existence, of course, being a counter spell, but it can only counter creature spells.
It's funny that you say that, Tim, because he actually does. It's just not the right one. Wow, that's a huge play for Timothy Wu. He was definitely in a really bad position before that, and now all of a sudden things are evened up, and we might be headed straight for a draw here. Time's going to be called in the round in, a matter of seconds here, and then how the heck is David going to chip through all of the defenses here? Or, on the other side, how is Timothy going to find a victory? A few cards come to mind. Magmatic Chasm could do something here for Timothy. If he's playing a copy of that, which, by the way, I'm going to look up right now, because not a ton of cards that win him the game, but there are some.
Looks like Timothy actually with a copy of Malevolent Whispers.
Okay, that's one of the ones that can help swing a board state and sneak in that 7 damage if David lets his shields down a little bit too much.
Counter this, ping this.
Timothy tries for a Gatstaff Arsonist. It's countered by Deny Existence.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Timothy is trying to wait till the last possible second to try to set up a turn where he steals one of David's creatures, maybe finds a pump spell, maybe finds something, he does not have a Magmatic Chasm. I already looked. Expose Evil could be the difference, but he doesn't have one of those in his list either. It's going to be really difficult to punch through this board state.
No, this one should be exiled.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Okay. Yeah.
sorry.
Doing a quick library count here as well. As you can see on the bottom part of your screen, we are in additional turns. This is additional turn 2 of 5 total. We're on David Mines. He's really trying to rack his brain and see if he can find a victory here.
Sure.
He's got the Bedlam Reveler and the Drownyard Behemoth lined up for attacks, and he's going to go ahead and send in with both.
I'll block that.
So pretty easy block for Timothy Wu. He's just going to chump block with the Sanguinary Mage and then end up sacrificing it.
Yep. That Extricator of Flesh doing a ton of work this game.
Upgrading cards that are pretty good in the early game and really not great in the late game into something that, a 3/2 Vigilance could be the difference here.
Sure. Take 3.
Yep. 6.
Go.
Well, he's got Timothy down to 6, but he's taken on a bit of risk by attacking with 2 creatures. The Jace's Scrutiny in his hand could certainly help. If Timothy does go for some huge play, maybe he finds exactly what he needs here.
Screw.
Timothy's going to kind of do his due diligence here and survey the scene and see what's going on. Can I win? He's on turn 3. He gets another turn. Goes to David. He takes his turn, and then Timothy gets to take his.
Yeah, I mean, what he's trying to set up here is just to actually get so many creatures that he can steal one of David Mine's with Malevolent Whispers, make a big attack, and then David won't have enough blockers to prevent enough damage. However, it doesn't look like we're quite at that stage here. Timothy with, I think, 6 potential attackers. David with 5 potential blockers. 1 gets stolen by the Malevolent Whispers.
You need to take a decision after that.
Sure.
But certainly a lot of math to be done.
Thank you.
Yeah, he's pointing at the hand where Garrison, because that actually nets him an additional 2 attackers as well, though they are just 1/1s.
Yeah, great point.
Uh-oh. He's going for it.
Yeah, if there's a turn to go for it, it's this turn.
Whispers?
Now,
David's heart has to kind of stop when he says whispers.
what we know that Timothy doesn't when he's
Yeah.
doing this math is
Yeah.
that David Mines actually has a copy of Jace's Scrutiny in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
So that could potentially throw off the careful calculation that Timothy has been working on here.
Now, the interesting part is if Timothy just decides that David doesn't have anything and just goes all for it, and the Jace's Scrutiny is the difference in combat, he could leave himself completely shields down here.
Well,
Now,
the
good
thing
news
is-
is that Vigilance is helping.
That's
him.
right, yeah. The Extricator of Flesh is actually giving all those Eldrazi Vigilance. So there's an interesting thing that could happen here. This could actually just turn into a good value attack for Timothy as well.
By the way, he has attacked with everything. Oh,
Yeah.
so you're saying he could chip away at David's board and try to kill him next turn?
Exactly. And the other thing is he can sacrifice the stolen Hanweir Garrison to the Extricator of Flesh and get to keep the Eldrazi. So there's a cool thing going on there as well.
Oh, yeah. That's
So-
a sweet combo.
Let's go ahead and watch and see how this plays out.
All right. So everything's in the red zone here for Timothy Wu.
And targeting
And right now we've got that
this and this. It should glue.
Jace's Scrutiny hitting the stack. He also used the Weaver of Lightning there.
These clues. Sure.
He Geist blasted it from his graveyard. So it wasn't just 1 copy of Jace's Scrutiny. It was actually 2. He copied it using a Geist blast that was hidden in his graveyard.
Is all the damage on it?
Yep.
Yeah, it does look like at least part of what you described, Ian, is going to happen here in that David is trying to chip away as many of these Eldrazi, the untapped attackers here, as it were, as possible, and leave himself with enough to maybe crack back.
Yeah, so remember, each player gets 1 more turn after this turn. So that's 1 opportunity for David to try to actually make a lethal attack against Timothy, and then 1 more opportunity for Timothy to follow up on this attack and get in even some more damage and finish off the game.
David drew a convolute with that clue. Not really what he wants to see here, to be honest. Timothy, I believe, is out of cards as well. Yeah, the judge is reminding David to make a play, but it is a very tough situation to try to work through.
Sure. So you take 5? Is that right? 1, 2.
It's a, I'm sacking this clue.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay.
Damage.
Okay, so we're going to see a board state that's been pretty well built up since we came into this match get very much cleared up here.
He's died.
I'm drawing 2 cards.
Right.
It is just a slaughter. 1 card and 2 cards from the Exalted Cultist. And wow, he has sure found a lot of lands off of those clues and card draw triggers. Another thing is that David is... How many cards are in his library?
Yeah, I don't think he's in danger of actually running out here, but
Okay.
you know, he may be thinking about a particular card that's left in his library that could allow him to win on the following turn.
Removal spell of some sort, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Or a burn spell, perhaps. So what's left here are 2 untapped Eldrazi for Timothy Wu.
David drew another land. Look at his hand.
Wow.
4 lands and a convolute. Even after last turn, he drew 4 cards. He's got 1 card left, it looks like, in his library. This is turn 4 of extra turns, though, so as you mentioned, it is just that last card. David will know what that last card is. David fell down to 2 in that attack, which means that Timothy Wu is prime position here to win this game. Sure, David can force a couple of chump blocks here, but Timothy just gladly obliges and then cracks back and kills him.
Yeah, this is the last turn of the game here for Timothy Wu, so he has nothing to lose. He's going to send all his creatures
And he's going to win.
into the red zone. And yeah, we know that David Mines has nothing but a convolute in his hand.
Yeah, I'll win. All time.
Everybody's in. And David really can't do much here outside of line up blocks and show Timothy his hand and say, yeah, maybe that last card would have made the difference.
Wow,
And
that's
he's
it.
got it. Timothy Wu wins in turn 5 of extra turns, masterfully really setting up. I like the way you describe that, Ian, the kind of value attack that turn prior to his last turn.
Yeah,
And then the follow-up.
pretty incredible
killed
on a
him.
board that full to sequence 2 attacks in a row that sort of chip down your opponent's defenses and then the following attack finishing them off. So yeah, hats off to Timothy Wu on navigating that really, really tough calculation there.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about tight technical play, these are some of the things that pop up, right? It's a complicated board. There's a lot going on. You have to work through it, and Timothy Wu did that, and he was rewarded for it. All right, let's send it back to Richard Hagan at the news desk.
Thanks very much, Marshall and Ian Duke there. Portugal, rejoice. You have a seat at the World Championship table. Marcio Carvalho will represent you in that amazing 24-person tournament. He is your draft master for 2015-2016, and you cannot fault him. He came in today and yesterday with 6 rounds of draft. He needed 5 of them. He won all of them. No one else managed that amongst the contenders. He just kept on trucking, and he is your draft master for 2015-2016. Congratulations to him. You will see him at the World Championship. But right now, it's time for draft viewer action. Waiting for us at the wall, Randy Bueller, and with him a very special guest. It's Reed Duke.